This video is a response to TIK's video on how Nazism is a form of socialism. Hopefully, I can convince you that Nazism is in fact a form of capitalism. Let's begin with defining capitalism, something that TIK didn't do in his first 20-minute video or in his second 30-minute response video. Capitalism is a social and economic system in which socioeconomic relations are based on the exchange of commodities. This is manifested in the private ownership of the means of production and the existence of wage labor. Capitalism is seen as a step in the ladder of history, advancing from feudalism, which in turn advanced from slave society. This theory is known as historical materialism. On the right, there are clarifications of important terms used. Although TIK never provides a coherent definition of capitalism in this video, he does provide us with several hints regarding his beliefs about capitalism.
But isn't capitalism a system in which there are free markets and every individual is free to do what he wants? In Nazi Germany, businesses had to follow the interests of the nation, and people had their freedoms restricted. This can't be capitalism, right?
Sorry, TIK, but it seems you're a bit confused about what capitalism actually means. But before we get into whether or not Nazi Germany and other capitalist countries could truly be considered capitalist, we'll have to take a peek into the essential features of capitalism in any individual state. TIK is using an ahistorical and made-up definition of capitalism, which is only used today by anarcho-capitalists and right libertarians. In reality, the existence of free markets is ancillary to the presence of capitalism in a state. That is to say, a country can be considered capitalist without the existence of completely free markets. Nazi Germany is a good example of a country with a state-guided economy which retained capitalism. Other examples include France, Singapore, South Korea, the United Kingdom, Japan, the United States, and more. Capitalism has several distinguishing features which you can use to determine whether or not a state is capitalist. These are the private ownership of the means of production, the existence of wage labor as a dominant mode of production, the existence of classes, specifically proletariat and bourgeoisie. Now let's see what TIK has to say about socialism.
Alright, I understand that Nazi Germany was capitalist, but doesn't socialism allow capitalism? I mean, Nazi Germany had welfare, and it was called the People's State by Hitler, and Hitler talked about how the Aryan race was willing to self-sacrifice for the good of the community, and they got rid of undesirables and...
Hang on there, TIK. It looks like you don't really know what socialism means. Let's take a moment to dive into the definition of socialism, examples of existing socialism, and finally apply those criteria to Nazi Germany, in order to determine whether or not they were indeed socialist. Let's see if what TIK claims about socialism stands up to reality. Socialism is a word with a long history, and as a concept had existed long before Marx and Lenin. In general, several attributes can be ascribed to any form of socialism. These are the abolition of private property, abolition of wage labor, collectivization of the means of production, and an overall belief in the equality of all humans. Notice that socialism is unquestionably completely incompatible with capitalism. Let's look at some examples of different types of socialism working in the real world. Socialism has existed in many forms throughout history, each time representing one of the three forms listed in the previous slide. Utopian socialist communities existed in the beginning of the 19th century. Libertarian socialism towards the end of the 19th and near the beginning of the 20th centuries, and Marxist socialism dominating the entire 20th century, so much so that it is considered by most to be the real definition of socialism. Utopian socialism is characterized by small communities and a lack of violence. Libertarian socialism is characterized by opposition to state power, even as a temporary means to achieve communism. Marxist socialism is characterized by the capture of the bourgeois state and establishment of a worker state, also called a dictatorship of the proletariat, with the intent of collectivizing the means of production and building the road to communism. Alright. Now that we're armed with the basic definitions of capitalism and socialism, we can apply these criteria to Nazi Germany in order to conclusively determine whether or not they were socialist. To recap, I have added a chart that explains the basic differences between capitalism and socialism in easy terms. When we analyze the economy of Nazi Germany, we find that it's transparently capitalist. For example, the term privatization was coined in order to describe the economic practices of the Nazis. Based on the information given to us by the graph on the right, we can determine that the rate of return on capital increased greatly in Nazi Germany, indicating a vast increase in profits for the capitalist class. It's clear then that private property as well as classes existed in Nazi Germany, in contradiction to the definition of socialism provided earlier. The elimination of undesirables, as TIK puts it, was racially based, not based on class. This is decidedly unsocialist. Now, let's apply the previous graph to Nazi Germany and determine whether or not they were capitalist. We'll add in the USSR to show differences between the two states. If anyone has any objections to make about the USSR being socialist, please bring them up and I'll link you to some resources about that. As we can see from looking at the chart, Nazi Germany fills every single category needed to be capitalist and fills none of the categories needed to be socialist. We can conclude then that Nazi Germany was a capitalist state, not a socialist state. TIK's video was an abysmal failure in terms of factual content, rhetoric, and impartiality. TIK allowed his bias or ignorance to skew reality, and the result was a dangerous piece of fiction that perpetuates the myth of horseshoe theory. TIK failed to define a single term coherently in his 20-minute video, instead going on irrelevant tangents about Nazi racism and atrocities. His video is a testament to all YouTubers on exactly how not to discuss the economy and political ideology of Nazi Germany. Hopefully this video has undone some of the damage caused.
Okay, you got me. Next time I'll be more careful.